Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Anbiya wal Mursaleen Nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in, amma ba'd. So what we actually did, and I think this is something that is really important to kind of understand and get a grasp of legal theory and how to extract rulings, is to do a survey of verses. And when you do a survey of verses and you do a survey of a hadith, it gives you an idea of actually how to deal with the text and what was it that the uṣūliyin or the scholars of legal theory were doing. And what they would actually do is they would take a survey of all these texts. They would collect all of these verses that have commands in them. They would collect all these verses that have prohibitions in them. They would collect all these hadith that have commands and all these hadith that have prohibitions, and say, okay, like, what are some of the themes that we're seeing here? And there's always going to be an inclination. And we discussed some of these verses last week. So here, أقم الصلاة لدلوك الشمس إلى غسق الليل وقرآن الفجر إن قرآن الفجر كان مشهودا. Observe the prayer from the decline of the sun until the darkness of the nights, and the dawn prayer, for certainly the dawn prayer is witness. Over here, what are you guys understanding from this, from observe the prayer? What comes to mind? And we said there are basically three choices that we had initially come up with, and there are more, and we'll see them as we continue. But what are the initial three choices that we had discussed when we have a command? It can either be an obligation, right, for sure. What else? Voluntary, right? So an obligation, voluntary, and the last one? Well, a recommendation would be the second. What about permission, right? So either it can be an obligation, it would be a recommendation, or it could be a permission. And as we'll see as we deal with more verses, there are actually more choices. There are actually a few more that will come to mind. So over here, when we look at this, is observe the prayer, etc., to the end of the verse. What are some things that come to mind for you immediately? And don't worry, like no one's going to hold you guys account if you get the wrong answer. It's not a big deal. This is meant to be part of the exercise on how a legal theorist becomes a legal theorist, right? You know, we in order to do that, we actually have to engage with the text directly. So yeah, so over here, what would you say applies? Okay, so over here, you're saying that because prayer is a pillar, the immediate understanding that will come to mind, that is an obligation. Is there any other rulings that would come to mind here? Yes. Okay, so here, when you say until the darkness of the night and the dawn prayer. So over here, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us a window, what can I take from that? Right, I could take it as a recommendation, or I could take it as a permission. But over here, because it's falling under the guise of an obligation, right? Because we understand prayer to be an obligation. How did we determine prayer to be an obligation? And we said that every time that there's an order in the Quran, or there's an order in the Sunnah, it doesn't come in a vacuum, right? It's not like the Prophet ﷺ said, establish the prayer and then just walked away, right? Like there's obviously follow-up actions. The companions, they heard it and they acted on it and they understood it in a certain way. And there are other actions, like for example, the Prophet ﷺ, he said to dye the beard, right? He said, dye your hair and dye the beard. And this is a command. But even when the companions heard this command, some of them, they didn't dye their beards and they didn't dye their hair. Why? Because they're disobedient?
Because it was a recommendation.
Right, obviously, that's not a choice. So, and the fact that the Prophet ﷺ saw them not dyeing their hair and he didn't have a problem with it, that's something that's also very telling. So when he said to them, dye your hair, and they didn't, it's something that's optional. It was something that he ﷺ clearly made as a recommendation for them, which is why some of them decided to do it and others didn't. And when we have here observing the prayer, and here the Prophet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you said that this is an obligation, and that I would wholeheartedly agree with that. There's definitely an obligation. Even this, it's not so much here a recommendation or a permission. This is just telling us what? Right, instructions for what? Not just that, a little bit more. It tells us when the obligation applies, right? So it's giving us the actual time frame. So when we have this time frame here, meaning that outside of this time, then that obligation doesn't apply. And even one of the conditions, so you have precursors to prayer and you have conditions to prayer. One of the precursors to prayer, like right now, can I pray Maghrib right now? Why not? Because the prayer time actually hasn't started, meaning that I can't pray the prayer before the time comes in. This is what we call a precursor, right? There are some things that need to happen in order for that obligation to stand. And this is one of those things. Here, وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ وَارْكَعُوا مَعَ الرَّاكِعِينَ. In this one, we had more of a discussion last week when we said keep up the prayer, pay the prescribed alms, and bow your head with those who bow theirs. So here, there are 3 commands. Keep up the prayer, pay the alms, and bow your heads or make ruku' with the people of ruku'. These 3 orders, how do we deal with them in these 3 commands? Yeah, okay, all of them are obligations, right? And that's an easy way to deal with it. Why? Because they're all being mentioned together. Yes? Is there any way for us, or is there any reason for us to separate any of these obligations or any of these commands? So now we get into here. I don't think there's a difference between the first 2, correct? Nobody has a problem with these in saying that they're an obligation. Or does anyone think that prayer and zakah is a suggestion? No. Okay, alhamdulillah. So this last one, make ruku' with the people of ruku'. Like, what if I don't? Have I violated something? If I don't pray in jama'ah, if I don't pray in congregation, have I violated the command? And if I have violated that command, is it because that command is an obligation, or is it because it's a recommendation? Potentially. Okay, no, I'm saying, do you understand now why? Number one, this didn't come in a vacuum, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't say this and the Prophet then walked away, right? That this is not how fiqh works. Fiqh is you have these things and it's happening in amongst a whole cascade of other things. You have a number of supporting proofs that will help give us some insight and context into what some of these verses mean. I wish it was as simple as just reading a verse and then applying it, but that is a very approach. It's a very literalist approach, right? It's a very superficial approach where you just take this and be like, oh, well, this is haram. Why? Prophet ﷺ, he prohibited this. And you don't always find that to be the case. Sometimes you find him using a prohibitory clause or saying something is a prohibition, but all of the scholars will say that it's something that's makruh or disliked. So it's important for us to understand how to differentiate. But usually, if something's mentioned together in this way, just like Abdul Razak said, and I would agree with you, if this verse came by itself and there wasn't anything else that came with it, I would definitely agree. Not only is prayer an obligation and giving zakat is an obligation, but making prayer in congregation would also be an obligation, right? That's what. Yes, they do say that. They do say that. May Allah guide them. And why? Because for the different madhāhib, how literal and how figurative, and this is one of the discussions we had previously, right? The discussion between haqiqa and majaz, literal and figurative interpretation and how to deal with the text. This is important for us to keep in mind, because even if you go with a literal interpretation, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's important to understand all of these things in context. So here, you said that this part could be a problem, or this is something that we might actually be able to demote to something as a recommendation. Why is that? Okay, so over here there's so that would be al-amr ba'd al-hadr. That's basically an order after a prohibition, and we said that if an order comes after a prohibition, usually it cancels out to show permission of something. In this situation, these are all orders. Right? There's nothing that's being prohibited here. So the question then comes is for those. So let's say we said the Hanabila, they say that you have to pray in Jama'ah, and they use this as a proof. Like the other madhāhib, they say that it's sunnah. Okay. Sure. Okay, so there has to be. You're saying that there's more context to this, and then you have more supporting evidences. What are some of those supporting evidences that help me? Basically, the other thing is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he didn't put this in between salah and zakat. That can be something that's indicatory too. He put these in order for a reason. Salah, is there any time where salah a person can be excused from prayer knowingly? If a normal healthy person, can he be excused from prayer? Normal healthy person? No, not excused. A normal healthy person, can they be excused from giving zakah? Yeah, if they don't have the money, right? A person can be normal, he can be healthy, he can be, he can be young, he can have all of the tools available to him, but if he doesn't have the money, he doesn't have to give. He doesn't give zakat. So this is something that applies all the time. This is something that applies sometimes. So you can actually see a digressing order that's coming here, meaning that the application of this can be in particular situations. So the last one could be the lowest if you look at it that way. So even if we use certain linguistic tools, but what am I trying to do at that point? Now I'm trying to feed my argument because I've already developed a conclusion. So and so being subjective in these things, you try, obviously. I mean, being objective is something that's really important. There's no doubt about it. But again, dealing with these texts, it's sometimes easy for us to deal with them when we're looking at it from a distance or looking at them very superficially. And many times we're missing the context. The other thing that's important to keep in mind is the context that you guys know of or you're aware of. What allows you to say that Salah and Jama'ah or congregational prayer is a recommendation? If you guys don't come up with one, that means all of you have to pray in congregation. Okay, so this is a rational proof, meaning that this is not something, it doesn't seem like it can be done. It doesn't make sense Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would obligate something that an individual can actually do. And irrational proofs do apply in many situations. And could it apply here? Yeah, I think there is a possibility for it applying here. And is it practically possible to really implement this on a mass scale? Not really. What else?
Because we know that the command for Salah exists outside of the back.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing to indicate if you don't do it in Jama'ah.
Okay. Well, this indicates, Akhi, right here.
Nothing indicates that if you don't do it in Jama'ah, that you don't do it, that you don't.
That you don't pray. Okay, that's actually a very good point. So this is called mafhum mukhalafa. This is basically what you're taking is what is going to be the English of this. This is inferred incongruence. It's basically what you're understanding from the rest of the verses is that the command for prayer comes, but not every single command for prayer is joined with the congregation. And I think that's fair. I think that's a good way of dealing with it. You were going to say something?
I was going to say, like you mentioned last week, it's not like you get a reward for praying.
Yeah, so you have a very clear hadith, Bukhari and Muslim, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said the one that prays by himself gets, the one who prays himself gets one reward, and the one who prays in congregation, 25 times more, right? It could 25, 27, 22, depending on the different narrations. So if somebody is sinful, why would they get a reward in the first place? Again, so these are all very good supporting proofs to give us an idea that why it's this command here, bowing your heads with those or praying in Salat al-Jama'ah, isn't something that is an obligation in and of itself. Yes. Mm. So the times he prayed alone was when he was making qiyam. So, but are there situations where he prayed the obligatory prayer by himself? I can't think of a scenario. Yeah, maybe in Mecca, like before there were a lot of Muslims. That's the only situation I could really. But even the 5 prayers they hadn't become obligated at that point. I don't know. That's a good question. And did the Prophet ﷺ ever make a fard prayer alone? I don't know. It's a good question.
Maybe during the orders.
Possibly because he didn't join the congregation. Yeah, because he didn't join the congregation. No, Jazakallah khair. That you're right. So that's definitely a possibility. Yeah, but other than those 2 scenarios, no, I can't think of any. Wallahu alam. I don't. But that's actually a very good point. Because he would see the Jama'ah. There are narrations where he would actually look outside and he would be happy that people are praying, but he sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself didn't join. Here, وَإِذَا حَلَلْتَمْ فَاصْطَادُوا, that when you have completed the rites of pilgrimage, hunt. So when I'm done making Hajj, then I hunt. I have to hunt. It's recommended to hunt. It's a command. No, فَاصْطَادُوا. Yani this is a command for sure. That's a permission. Okay, and this goes back to what Iman was saying. How do we know that it's a permission? Because when I am in ihram, am I allowed to hunt? No, I'm not. So over here, when we say al-amr ba'd al-hadr, or when you have a command after a prohibition, what happens is they cancel themselves out to become at the end a permission. Does that make sense? فَإِذَا قَضَيْتَ الصَّلَاةَ فَانْتَشِرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ, that when the prayer has ended, disperse in the land. And this is talking about Salat al-Jum'ah. I am obligated now to go and buy and sell
Permission
after.
to go.
Oh, it's permission, right? Why is it? Why do we know it's a permission?
Well, as you said, that the command comes
Mhm.
and after the command ceases.
Okay, so the prohibition, yeah, whenever a prohibition comes and a command comes after it, it becomes permission. وَابْتَغُوا مِنْ فَضْلِ اللَّهِ, and seek out Allah's bounty. Again, same thing. Over here is a question. No, over here this is a command. وَابْتَغُوا مِنْ فَضْلِ اللَّهِ. Yani seek Allah's bounty. Over here, disperse. This is the command.
No, I'm saying you were talking about when
Oh, here, right here. وَذَرُوا الْبَيْعَ. Yeah, leave off your trading. So this ayah is first, and then this ayah comes after it. Yeah. Yeah, it was a little tricky. Yes. So over here, وَذَرُوا الْبَيْعَ, leave off trading. And this is at Jumu'ah time. This is a command to leave off. So over here is this command. I should have put this under prohibitions, honestly. I shouldn't have put it under commands. But you know, it's a good exercise. This is prohibition is of two. I'm gonna I guess we're jumping ahead a little bit, but prohibition, you have two types. What are they? Or if you're Hanafi, you have a couple more. You have three. You have three types. Two, and then two branch. Haram, right? And makruh, right? So you have prohibited and disliked. What's interesting about prohibitions is what? We don't have, like in commands, we had three. We had mubah. Taib, in prohibitions, we don't have mubah. Like we don't have permission. Permission only applies to commands. It cannot apply to prohibitions. So over here, leave off trading. Is this, what kind of command is it? Is this disliked or is it prohibited? Disliked, okay. During Jumu'ah. This is during Jumu'ah. Prohibited. I'll let you guys look that up later. Yeah. Because we're not there yet, so I can't talk about prohibitions. And when the forbidden months are over, wherever you encounter the idolaters, kill them, seize them, besiege them, wait for them at every lookout post. Allahu Akbar. So right now we're in Ramadan. Ramadan is not from the prohibited months. Why are you guys sitting here? What are the Ashhur al-Hurum? What are the 4 prohibited months? You guys know? Dhul Qa'dah, Dhul Hijjah, Muharram, and Rajab, right? These are the 4 prohibited months. Interestingly enough, Ramadan is not a prohibited month. What famous battle happened in Ramadan? Badr, right? Badr. So over here, what's happening? What is this? Is this a command? Is it a recommendation? Is it a permission? It's a command. Allahu Akbar. You guys are all wasting your time in my class. But this goes back to something that we had spoken about earlier. Ahsant. Al-amr ba'd al-hadr. Because over here, what was the prohibition? The prohibition was to fight during those months. So when Allah is ordering to fight outside of those months, what happens? It becomes permission. So you guys can stay in class. Like, يَعْمَلُوا مَا شِئْتُمْ. Do whatever you want. But it's so here. Iman, she says this is a warning. This is a warning, right? You're here. So no, I'm saying, but even if we say in English, if somebody's coming and arguing me, and I say to them, yeah, do whatever you want. What does that mean? Right? It's a warning. It's not. I'm not. Am I actually? Do you really think Allah is actually telling them, like, hey, you guys go ahead, do whatever you want? Right? Rationally, it's impossible. Rationally, it's impossible. It doesn't make sense. This is a warning, and now a warning. I mean, do what you want, because the understanding is what? Do whatever you want, but you will be punished. So that is the understanding that's here. But what's interesting is this is an order. This is an order, and it doesn't fall under an obligation. It doesn't fall under a recommendation, and it doesn't fall under a prohibition. And as we continue with the text, Imam al-Juwayni, he actually talks about this. Tahdeed, or warning, is one of the functions of a command. So you guys just added, you managed to add a category yourselves without even going into the text. And again, how did the usuliyin do it? The same way that we're doing this now. So basically, this is the back end work of coming up with the usul structure. Is you take a survey of all these verses and you try to figure out what it is those verses, what it is that they're saying. So rouse whichever of them where you can with your voice, muster your cavalry and infantry against them, share their wealth and their children with them, and make promises to them. Shaitan promises them nothing but delusion. So over here, this is the shaitan discussing, saying he's encouraging them. Like basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's talking to the shaitan here. Are you guys following? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking, and he's saying this to the shaitan, that do whatever you can, make all the promises you can, rouse whatever you can from your ability and your power. And then he closes by saying, shaitan, وَمَا يَعِدُهُمُ الشَّيْطَانَ إِلَّا غُرُورًا. So over here, shaitan makes promises them with nothing but delusions. Over here, these are all commands. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is commanding the shaitan to do this. Why? What? So is this an obligation for shaitan? Is it a recommendation for shaitan? Is it a permission for shaitan? Or is it something else altogether? It's a challenge. It's a challenge. So it didn't fall under any of these categories. So again, the context makes all the difference. And you will find, again, this is one of the categories and one of the functions of commands in the Quran, that they come as challenges or they will come here as warnings. قُلْ أَنْفِقُوا طَوْعًا أَوْ كَرْهًا لَنْ يَقْبَلَ اللَّهُ مِنْكُمْ. It says, we expect Allah to inflict punishment on you, either from himself or at our hands. So wait, we too are waiting. Again, this is a warning, right? This is a clear warning. Whether you give or don't give, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will deal with them. استغفروا لهم أو لا تستغفر لهم. Seek forgiveness for them or do not. Over here, what is Allah saying? What is this command? What do we take from it? Okay, it could be permission, but does it sound like permission?
No, they're the same.
Well, هذه سمى مساوي or تساوي. It's basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he does this is showing an equation. That this action has what? There's no benefit, right? There's no benefit in this action. And whether you do it or not, it's not going to make any difference. But the same thing, it is an order. فَاصْبِرُوا أَوْ لَا تَصْبِرُوا. Regardless of whether you are patient or not, what's going to happen? It's still going to happen. Here, if any one of the idolaters should seek your protection, grant it to him so that he may hear the word of God. Then take him to a place safe for him, for they are people with no knowledge. Now, what do you guys think about this? This is an obligation. If somebody comes to me seeking asylum or seeking refuge, am I obligated to give him asylum or refuge? The recommendation? Okay. A strong one. Okay. You're allowed. Oh, okay. You think it's permission? Okay. I mean, that's fair. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. I would say that it's a recommendation. But this, even certain obligations, does every obligation need to fall onto an individual? So we have collective obligations. So over here, for an individual to seek asylum, does he usually seek asylum with individuals, or does he seek asylum with an authority?
In the cases of, we know, the historically, the cultural, what they did, they seek refuge with tribes.
Yeah, with authorities. Yeah. Sure. Even today, when a person applies for asylum, does he come and knock on my door and gives me the application as an American? No. Well, who does he apply with? Oh, with the government, with the USCIS, right? So this idea of seeking asylum, it's really a collective obligation that can fall on institutions or can fall on nations, but it is not necessarily an individual one. And if an individual does give asylum to these people, then it is recommended for him to do so. فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. That whoever wills, let him believe, and whoever wills, let him disbelieve. What do you guys think about that? A choice? A challenge? Okay. Right. So over here, basically, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what is Allah saying here? That whether you believe or not, what happens? If you believe or not, what happens? It's the same to who? It's the same to Allah. Ahsant. Right? For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, does my iman benefit him? Or does disbelief benefit him or hurt him? No. So for these things, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, again, he's showing tasawi. He's showing that these things are the same. Yes. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, for us, this is definitely a warning. So how do I know that this is a warning? Like, because the thing is, it's not possible that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he doesn't reveal verses abatha, right? He doesn't reveal them for no reason. Even I know many times, like especially in the modern day, we've fallen into this habit, like the huruf al-muqatta, right? The broken letters, lam ra, alif lam mim, hamim, all of these. What is the major argument that you guys have heard for these letters? Yeah, what do they mean? So when you guys, this is something that's beyond our knowledge. So is there a verse in the Quran that the Mufassirin haven't explained, saying that, oh, there's no explanation for this verse? No. So Imam al-Tabari, he actually deals with huruf al-muqatta. He actually deals with the broken letters, and I think he brings like 27 different arguments on what they are and what they mean.
But at the end of the day, he can't really say. I mean,
sure.
Ultimately, probably say Allah knows best, right?
So
really
okay, sure. And I could push back and say, well, I can say that for any verse. Really?
Yeah.
Like this is, so when you can say with full confidence, this is what Allah meant.
Almost don't have so many different meanings. They're a little bit more clear.
So what about sure? What about the unclear verses?
Well, even then, they don't probably have it. They're a little bit more clear than how they can make it.
Possibly, but in clarity is always going to be subjective.
I mean, okay.
Right? You know what I mean? No, that's good. No, the thing is, like, I mean, in part of the engagement is important, right? Part of this, yeah.
Really feel like the verses of the letters are just as unclear as other verses in the Quran?
No, I mean, but for me, like, I have a belief that they're very clear to me. I believe that these are called huruf al-tahaddi, that they were meant as a challenge to the Arabs. We're using your letters and your language against you, bring something similar to it. Because you will find that all of the verses that follow these broken letters, it's always followed by a challenge, almost always. So for me, it's clear. But the thing is, clarity is always going to be subjective. Some people are going to be like, no, it still doesn't. You know what I mean? It doesn't fit with me, and that's okay. Some scholars, they say that no, these are actually some of the names of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? And again, these aren't uncommon explanations for these verses. At the end of the day, I do agree with the fact that even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what does he say about the Quran? He said that some of the verses are clear, like, and some verses are ambiguous. The ambiguity, like any verse that's ambiguous, regardless of how ambiguous I feel it is, at the end of it, I'm going to say just like you said, and Allah knows best. Like, just because I'm confident in that this is what it means, it's not necessarily that I'm right, but it helps give me perspective when I'm dealing with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So yes, we were talking about this verse about believing and disbelieving. So over here, how do I benefit from it? Because like we said, that these verses, they're not revealed like for no reason. There has to be a reason here. How can I benefit from this? I guess this is a good tadabbur exercise. Sure. How can I benefit it in terms of a ruling? There's no punishment for apostasy. Okay. Like, there's no had, yani. Yeah. Okay. There's no legal punishment, or I would say there's no shari'i punishment for apostasy. Can there be a political legal one? Yes. Like just like with other things. So, okay. That's fair. I can see that. What else? That's it? Huh? Man, you guys need to engage with the Quran more.
I'm seeing it in a more simple way. It's like you have the choice to believe it.
Oh, you actually see it as, so you're saying that this is actually a choice for mankind.
Yes.
That mankind has been given this choice on whether they want to believe or whether they want to disbelieve.
The results, like,
No, I'm saying the results are up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But I mean, this is a very, I mean, I think it's a good insight. Basically, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala this is a sign of Allah's free will that He's given to mankind, that He's actually given them the choice to believe or to disbelieve. Okay, I mean, I think that's very good. What else? Yes, a warning for sure. Yeah, right. It's just because we've been given free will doesn't mean that we won't be held accountable. And not just that, the other thing that for me, what's kind of scary is that with the fact that we have that choice, the fact that choice actually exists, it's very scary for me, individually, because we all have families, and nobody wants anyone in their family, like including themselves, to ever disbelieve, and to know that choice exists, or even if it's like it's a rational choice that's out there. It is scary. Yeah.
I'm reading the conversation we had about a person and belief, and this to me would be a further clarification that we don't have the right to not allow somebody to.
MashaAllah. No, I'm sorry. No, that's beautiful. I like that. Yeah.
We don't have to say you can't join this club.
Like we're not gatekeepers. Yeah. We're like this verse is telling us we're not allowed to be gatekeepers.
You can't say you
can't
be Muslim.
Yes.
Because of whatever your whatever it is, you're drunk,
yeah,
you're a drug addict, you're homosexual, or
I have no right to deny you.
No, I can't say. Okay.
No, Jameel.
Jameel. Jameel. You have to deal with your sin.
MashaAllah. No, Jazakallah khair. That's actually a very nice point. Did you guys catch that? No, it's okay. So basically, what has happened traditionally in many Muslim communities is when somebody comes saying, "Hey, I want to accept Islam," what do? What is our first reaction? We start questioning them. Well, why do you want to accept Islam? What is it about Islam that you want? And like, yeah, right. So it's like, oh, well, you have all these things going on, and the conversation I had with Mikael, so he was like, well, how do you deal with someone when they walk into your office and they want to take their shahada? I was like, I tell them, repeat after me, ashhadu la ilaha, like, and he was like, he's like, that's so different than the way that's we've kind of dealt with this culturally. I'm like, I'm not a gatekeeper. If somebody wants to accept Islam, I'm going to take advantage of the spark at that moment, and maybe whatever happens afterward, maybe Allah will forgive them. I don't know. But if I start grilling them and I become a gatekeeper, like, yeah, you know what? I never really thought about that. I need to go home and think about this. Like, yeah, and did I inadvertently push this person away instead of taking advantage of that spark? So, mashallah, jazakallah khair. Was that? Yes.
Do you like try to understand if they have an understanding of what they're saying, or do you just kind of accept it at face value?
I was gonna say, do you have to do the 6 pillars of Iman check?
No, I accept it at face value, personally. And the thing is, having that check, it'll come in time. It'll come in time. The important thing for me is that the person takes the shahada, and then after that, whatever questions I have, that at that point, you can go in, you can start asking them. What I usually do is I will try to connect them to the community first. I think that's the healthiest way to actually navigate it, because what happens is that if we start questioning them too much, it's already overwhelming, right? When a person comes to Islam, they feel like there's so many things that they have to learn, and like so many prohibitions and so many commands, and they're like, all right, what about this and what about that? And giving them that space and say, hey, listen, just start, just join the community. Come in time, you'll get it, inshallah. The other thing is, I know I went on a rant. It was in one of the classes, right, about the convert revert thing, and like how I really hate that. Like, it's like you're just a new Muslim. That's it, because there comes a time when you're no longer new, and it's at that point, like, because I know people who, like, 6 years in, they still haven't learned how to read the Quran. They haven't learned how to pray, and you're like, what's going on? It's like, oh, I'm a convert. Versus if we just called them a new Muslim, it's like, okay, nah, bro, you're not new anymore. Like, you're responsible for these things, and even people who have been practicing for like 40 years. There are people who have been Muslim longer than I've been alive, and then with them, it's like, oh yeah, he's a convert. I don't really like that stamp. So here, قُلْ يَا قَوْمِ اعْمَلُوا عَلَى مَكَانِكُمْ إِنِّي عَامِلٌ. That persist in your ways, for I too will persist in mine. What is this? Okay. So and that is what?
Like to each their own.
To each their own. And in a way, this is like a warning, right? And this is the way this is a warning. Okay, yeah, go ahead, work. It's like sometimes how we do with kids. It's like, okay, yeah, go. see how that works out for you. So you do have this, and again, the same mechanism of giving a command. فَاعْبُدُوا مَا شِئْتُم مِّن دُونِهِ, that worship then whatever gods you want instead of him. Again, like, you know what I mean? Like there's a pattern here that we're seeking and that we're seeing. وَأَسِرُّوا قَوْلَكُمْ وَاجْهَرُوا بِهِ, keep your words secret or state them openly. This is to show equality, you know, whether you say them out loud or whether you say them quietly. One of the reasons that this was revealed is, you guys know? Mm-hmm.
Someone was like praying.
Loudly?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
The other.
Okay. So this particular sabab I'm not aware of. The only other one I'm aware of is when the companions were making talbiyah. They were like doing it like, no, they were making dua. They're making dua like really loudly. So then the Prophet ﷺ, he told them, he said, listen, Allah can hear everything. It's okay. Like you don't need to be so loud. قُلْ كُونُوا حِجَارَةً أَوْ حَدِيدًا, say stone, be stone or iron. Why? So if you guys want the context, it's Surah Isra, verse 50. So it goes, قُلْ كُونُوا حِجَارَةً أَوْ حَدِيدًا أَوْ خَلْقًا مِمَّا يَكْبُرُ فِي صُدُورِكُمْ فَسَيَقُولُونَ مَنْ يُعِيدُنَا قُلِ الَّذِي فَطَرَكُمْ أَوَّلَ مَرَّةٍ. So basically the verse is talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala challenging them and saying to them, okay, be whatever it is that you're trying to be, or be whatever it is that you want, because they are challenging Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and saying, who is going to bring us back? What is this being that exists that's going to bring us back? Because they had two major problems with Islam. Do you guys know what those two major problems were? Number one, I'm pretty sure everybody's aware of. I'm sorry? The akhirah, like that was a big issue for them. Like, what do you mean? There's something after this world? It doesn't make sense. So what? We're just going to be resurrected? We're just like from our dust, like from our bones, we're going to be put and be made people again? Like this was something that was extremely problematic for them. In addition to the shirk, like how is it possible that we don't have people who can influence or challenge God? You know, these were the two major issues here. So over here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is addressing that in this situation. Here, this is a verse that I'm sure many of us are familiar with, that you who believe, when you're about to pray, wash your faces and your hands up to the elbows, wipe your heads, your feet up to the ankles, and when junub, purify yourselves. If any of you is sick or on a journey or has just relieved himself or had contact with a woman and can find no water, oh, lamastum, I'm sorry, this is a mistranslation for you Shafis. Then take some clean sand and wipe your face and hands with it. Allah does not wish to place any burden on you. He only wishes to cleanse you and perfect his blessing on you so that you may be thankful. Over here, there are a series of commands. There are a series of commands here. These commands are an obligation. Like when, now, let me ask a tougher question. When does this obligation apply?
When there is no
before you pray, right? This, when you're about to pray. Meaning that outside of preparation for prayer, am I obligated to be on wudu? No. The second thing is talking about tayammum, right? So if you don't have any water, you can use sand, you can make tayammum.
Do you have to be wudu for reading Quran?
There's khilaf. There's khilaf. Like, wiping the feet?
No.
Are you trying to cause problems? Al-fiqh, from what I remember, very famous.
But says, but the Hanafis, where did they get the names Junah? Because if you're sick on the journey,
Yeah.
and you relieved yourself, relieving it of that will make ghusl. So when they say it's intimacy,
Yeah.
so where do they get that from? In that context.
In this context, because basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing whether you break your wudu or you're obligated to make ghusl, tayammum takes its place. Does that make sense? Yeah. Nice try, Shāfi. So here, this is Imam al-Haramain. This is Juwayni's kalam. He says, according to the correct view, a command does not require repetition of the act unless some evidence indicates that repetition is intended, nor does it require immediate action. So this is a hukum al-fawr, a hukum al-tarahi. The Hanabila, we say that whenever Allah gives a command, you have to do it immediately. The Shafi'is, they say that it's wujub al-tarahi, meaning that you can delay it. It's not an obligation. It's okay for you to delay certain actions as long as there is a window for delaying that action. Meaning that if this year I have the financial ability to make Hajj as a Hanbali, I am obligated to make Hajj. The other madhāhib, they would allow this person to wait for a more opportune time. But if I think even they would hold him accountable if he died in that time period, that he was able to make Hajj and he decided not to. The other thing is that does not require repetition of the act. What does that mean? That when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands something, like when Allah commands wudu, how many times do I need to make wudu? Right, I just need to make it one time. And meaning that for every salah, do I need to make wudu? No, right? Right, unless I break it. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala listed those things that broke the wudu. So unless some evidence indicates that repetition is intended or needed. Right, zakat is something that's yearly, right? And that's something that it would have to be repeated. Even the prayers themselves, right? It's not that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said make the prayers and like one day I make fajr, dhuhr, maghrib, asr, maghrib, isha, and be like, whew, you know what I mean? I'm good. I will make 5 at a time, like alhamdulillah, I established my prayers. No, there is evidence for repetition for prayers. There's evidence for repetition for zakat, for fasting, for example. I can't just fast one Ramadan and be like, I fasted Ramadan. Yes.
What if you forget if you have wudu on?
That's a different issue. That's a different issue. So in the case where you forget if you have wudu, if you're sure you made it, then you continue on that. If you're sure you made it and unsure if you broke it, then you continue on surety. If you're unsure if you made it, but you're sure you broke it, then you would make wudu. The command to perform an action is a command to perform both the act and whatever is required for the completion of the act. Like what? Like wudu, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us to pray, so we are also commanded to make wudu, right? This is inferred. The command here, that's the command that's here. When the act is fulfilled, then the person to whom the command is addressed is released from the charge laid on him. What does that mean? Right. So once I pay the zakat, nobody can come to me and be like, no, you have to pay it again. You did it wrong. Right. Or if somebody prayed dhuhr, you can't come back and be like, no, you have to pray again, which is unfortunately more common than it should be in some communities. The believers are included in Allah's command, but the unaware, the child and the clinically insane are not addressed by it. So over here, Imam Juwayni, he makes an excuse for 3 groups of people. Who are they? I'm sorry? Unaware. All right. The jahil, the one who doesn't know. And who else? The clinically insane and the child, right? So these 3 groups of people are excused from these commands. Are they excused forever? No. So I'm sorry? Right, so until the conditions apply. So if a clinically insane person comes into sanity, at that point, all of the obligations would apply on them. Or if the one who's unaware, unawareness is of 2 types, right? Either it can be out of ignorance or out of forgetfulness, ignorance, or like.
Actually, I had a lot of people say, I don't want to run these things so that I cannot be accountable.
Oh, but the fact that he knows that they're aware, that's not his excuse is gone.
No, but they don't want to learn that specific issue.
No, but listen to what I'm saying. The fact that you know the issue exists, your excuse is done.
Regardless, we know the.
Even if you know the details or not, the fact that you know that it's aware, khalas, you're accountable at that point. Yeah.
It doesn't even matter if you're like yourself, like buying self and you just never even hear that it's like there are Islamic rules to it. Are you not still?
Sure. You're still accountable. You're still responsible. I can't, I can't open like a pork factory and be like, oh, I don't know. Nobody ever told me, you know what I mean? Like I've been praying at the masjid for 20 years and nobody said anything about my pork factory, right? It doesn't work like that. Yeah. Huh? Unaware would apply to somebody who's sleeping. somebody who's actually ignorant. Like, you know what I mean? Like they made the effort. They were never aware. There are certain details and certain rulings that people just don't know, right? And in those situations, it wouldn't apply. An individual never learned, for example, he grew up in a culture that's Hanafi. He had a cut, right? He cut his hand by accident. He didn't know that he has to make wudu again. Would he be held accountable at that point? Or is that a finer detail of prayer? So all he learned was that when he goes to the bathroom, that's when he has to make wudu for sure. If he's intimate, he has to make ghusl. Okay, we'll have him switch methods. Yes.
No, go.
Yes.
So I was on the phone like
So sure. So basically, it's somebody who has a complete break from reality. You need a psychospecialist to determine that. It's not. I mean, you can't bring him to a mufti and be like, hey, is he accountable or not? He won't know. And a lot of times, why do you need a psychospecialist in these cases? Because many times they can tell even when people are faking, right? Because some people will act like that to get out of punishment. You guys ever heard when somebody he murders someone, what do? They plead. They plead insanity. Why do they plead insanity? Because they're looking for a lesser sentence. So how do you determine if that person is actually insane or not? Right, you need a doctor, or you need a psychoanalyst to actually determine if this person is really faking or if he actually has a mental health issue. Yes.
So in some parts of the city, I come to know like there's Muslim families that own either a grocery store with an alcohol section,
Yeah,
or an alcohol store.
Yeah.
Right, but when Ramadan comes, they're giving that money for charity. Is that okay?
So for the ones who are receiving it, it's fine, but the ones who are giving it, they're not going to get any reward for that, and they're getting sin for the sale of those products. But because the hukum changed, like, for example, if somebody has like an alcohol store and he gifts me like $50,000, for me it's a gift, right? So the ruling for me is going to change. The fact how he got his money, that's between him and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
But if you know,
It's better not to take it. But even that, I mean, I'm saying even like as a base ruling, the ruling would change if out of your piety you refuse to take it because you know the source of where that's coming from. So the thing is, it's easy for us to say if somebody randomly comes up to, like, what if that person's your father? Right? All of a sudden that it doesn't become as easy. That choice doesn't become as easy, and you have to ask yourself, like, Sharan, is this okay or not? You're going to say something about Razak? No. Yes. Sure.
One day you said that someone prayed before Adhan.
Yeah.
Like it does not count.
Yes.
But if he's unaware of the Adhan.
If he's unaware of the Adhan?
Like of the timing of the Adhan.
Of the timing?
You said that before, but it doesn't count that he prayed before.
Yeah.
He is unaware of the count.
So because the thing is, there are major conditions for the prayer, and then there are minor breaks for the prayer. And it's very important for us to understand whether the major things, what I would consider, are the things that everybody agrees on, like the timings, except for us, right? So, but Aisha, really? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but I think within that, I don't think that window is very large though. The difference versus also. Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. So over here, in general, like for example, the prayer times and the prayer windows. This is something that almost everybody's agreed on, the prayer windows. So for me not to be aware, or for me to like come and pray and reverse the order of the prayer, right? These are some, like the structure of the prayer, the timing of the prayer. These are things that they're not excused. But minor things, like I said, like a cut or a drop or a nosebleed. These are khilafi issues. And when you have an issue of khilaf in that space, I believe that there is room for to overlook. It doesn't mean that the person should stop learning. No, and obviously we keep learning and we keep moving forward. But I think if there's room for scholars to disagree in it, so what about a layman who doesn't know? A disbeliever. So over here, this is interesting too. Disbelievers are addressed with commands concerning the details of the Sharia, meaning that a disbeliever is commanded to pray, a disbeliever is commanded to give zakat, a disbeliever is commanded to make hajj, etc., etc., etc. What do you guys think about that?
seems like the sequence is a little problematic.
Sure.
Because you perform these things as a disbeliever, you don't get any reward.
You don't get any reward. Yes. So that's the counter argument, right? That's the counter argument. So basically, but what their argument is that they're accountable. So not only will they be held accountable for their disbelief, but they'll also be held accountable for not performing their actions. That's what their argument is.
So are they arguing that if you're a disbeliever and you perform them, then
you're sinful, quote unquote?
You're less sinful? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know. I mean, so for me, what do they do? Say, "Ma salakum fi saqar qalu lam nakum min musallin." That what has landed you in hell? They said we did not pray. So over here, for me, this is more symbolic. They took it as literally, because the prayer is very symbolic of what? Of Islam, right? It's not necessarily that we actually didn't pray, but yes.
Well, I know a couple that went to Hajj, and then when they came back, the husband told the wife, "I only did it for you." What is that?
I only did it for you?
Yeah.
Allah. I don't know. It's like, but the problem with Hajj is an act of worship.
Yeah.
Like it's
So
not.
I only went because you wanted me to. Is that like?
So here, if it's more nuanced, meaning I only went now because you wanted me to, meaning that I wanted to make Hajj, but I wasn't intending on going now. I mean, I don't know. Like I'm trying to give him excuses. Yeah, like you can say no. It's like nah, he's going to hell. Like I mean, I don't know. Like
he just didn't. He's just very liberal and he wasn't into it.
I mean, whatever. I mean, may Allah guide us all. So so over here there is a difference of opinion. So you have I believe this is the opinion of the Hanafis, the Malikis, and the Shafis. No, the Hanafis, the Shafis, and the Hanbalis. Malikis, they say no. Malikis, they say no. They say that the disbelievers are actually not addressed with the details of the Sharia. So it is an issue of difference. That makes more sense to me personally, because like Abdul Razak was saying, right? Even if they did all those things, it's not going to benefit them. And Allah knows best. But the problem with this is that there are a lot of things that actually that affect it and are related to it, especially when you come into discussions with transactions. Like, right, is it permissible to sell pork to disbelievers because it is okay for them to eat it? The command to do something, prohibition of its opposite. Example.
To pray, not to pray.
To pray, not to pray, right? So very easy. If I'm commanded to pray, I'm also wait. How do I say that? I'm prohibited to not pray. Yeah, good. Thank you. And the prohibition of something is the command to do its opposite. Meaning, if I'm prohibited from lying, then I'm obligated to tell the truth. A prohibition is a verbal request obliging an inferior, and this is like a subordinate. Remember, we were talking about this last time on how is it, because in the language, when you make a command in the language, what do the linguists say? The scholars of language, when they say you have a command in Arabic, it usually is a what? It's a talab, it's a request. But in the Sharia, we say that it's an amr, it's an order. Why? What's the difference?
Request is optional.
No, for sure. I mean, in meaning, I know the difference. But I'm saying, how is it that you have scholars of language saying that it means like every order means a request, and you have scholars of Sharia saying that every order is a command?
The power dynamic.
The power dynamic.
When it's about.
Yes.
It's
Right. So basically, in the Sharia, you have, where are all the commands coming from? They're coming from Allah and His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right. So when you go from an authority to a subordinate, it's always going to be the primary mechanism should be a command. But in the language, what do linguists study? Not just words, right? They study speech of who? Of humans, right? And those humans, who are they talking to? Each other. So over here, they're all on the same level. This is why it can be considered a request. The verbal form of a command also occurs with the meaning of. So over here, remember, permitting, we had mentioned this. Threatening, we mentioned this. Equating, we mentioned this. Or creating. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Qul kun fayakun." Yani, be and it was. So these are all the different ways that commands are used in the text. Inshallah, next time we will discuss and we'll start talking about prohibitions. Any questions? Wallahu a'lam wa sallallahu ala khayri khalqin nabina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wasallam. No? All right. Jazakumullah khair. I'll see those of you who come to the Tazkiyah class, I will see you tomorrow, inshallah. Yes. Just let me.